that's the chapter that they cut out. They cut out a lot of the health chapter, which I don't think they should have.
Let them talk if they want to.
No, you weren't seeing what my butt is doing.
Talk don't bother me. I want the whole wide world to know that I love you so.
And welcome to Let 'em Talk. I'm Paul DeRienzo.
And I'm Miss Joan Moossy.
And our guest is Aton Edwards, and he is the author of the book we'll be talking about. Here it is, Preparedness Now. What's the full title? An Emergency Survival Guide?
For their family, for your families and, basically civilians.
Mm-hmm. And it's not the only reason. It just happened to be that we have you on, Aton, on the 1-year anniversary of the largest natural disaster in American history, the flooding, which happened today, 1 year ago today.
That's right.
This morning, about 9:30 Central Time in New Orleans, the first of the levees broke and let in millions of gallons of water and billions of gallons of water. And to this day, even today, the vast majority of people have not been able to return to their homes. They're saying now, at the time it was 1,000, it's now 2,000 dead.
Oh yeah, and as I was
2,000 dead.
No, yes, 2,000 over that. As we were
That's
speaking,
what they're reporting.
Yeah, before the program, we were speaking and telling Johnny that that they're still pulling bodies out of the homes, mummified, a lot of them, and totally decomposed.
Tonight I was watching one of the news programs, and they showed a BBC crew that found a whole family that was stranded on their porch, and inside the home was their mother, dead, lying on the bed inside the house, while they were sitting out on the porch for hours waiting to be rescued.
Well, that doesn't surprise me. I mean, generally speaking, that there were so many people who were there, who, the National Guard and the different, authorities that were assigned to kind of go and search the homes were stressed because there was just too much to do. Mm-hmm. And of course, then there's always the human element of sloth. It was very hot. Sure. It was a bad time. And
there wasn't enough water.
Right.
People were...
Yeah. We're going to be talking about preparedness for these kind of circumstances and the particular circumstances that affect New York. By the way, we have, I'm pointing at it right here, we're live, and that's our phone number, 212-757-1538. And we really invite the viewers to call in and to ask questions of Aton. Aton, you're quite an expert at this. We've known each other for 20 years now.
That's right.
And you are the not just the author of this book, but for a long time you've headed up an organization, the Preparedness Network, or
the International Preparedness Network.
We
started off the New York Preparedness Network, and
right.
then we just expanded.
Now it's international, and
right.
It has to be. And your expertise is in being prepared for a disaster.
Mm-hmm.
For every type of disaster, too. You're not limited to terrorism or weather or...
Yeah, what we were saying earlier, too, I think that to all New Yorkers and all viewers of the program, that, we've got to be realistic, right? Like what we were saying before. Mm-hmm. People have to begin to recognize that there's a certain amount of responsibility that you have to take for your own personal safety, because the government, quite frankly, cannot serve 300 million people. And
they couldn't serve 500,000.
Right, but as Joni and I were speaking before the program, think of the resources that it takes just to serve like one individual. Like, let's say you get into a serious car accident. So you're taken to an emergency room and you have 2-3 doctors working on you, 4 or 5 nurses, you have the EMTs that have to get you there, the firefighters that go and put out the fire in the car.
The police show up.
The police. Right. And this is just for one person.
And when you recover, of course, there's the people who help you with your rehabilitation and all those kind of things.
Right.
And the damage that was done to the car and everything else. So it's a gigantic amount of resources that go into one little fender bender.
One little fender bender. So can you imagine a major catastrophe like an earthquake? Mm-hmm. And New York has earthquakes every 120 years or so. So we're due for one. And also other large catastrophes.
Did you get that piece of mail? We got it in Manhattan. I know you're in Brooklyn. We got a piece of mail that actually has a map. It was put out by the OEM, the Office of Emergency Management of the city, and it shows how much of Manhattan, for example, would be flooded if a Category 2, 3, 4
hurricane
were to
right.
hit. And for example, my house would be underwater.
Yeah.
If a major hurricane hit on the Lower East Side.
Yeah, the storm surge would produce an enormous wave that would flood areas of Lower Manhattan and other areas of Manhattan, you know, the
absolutely.
lowest areas.
Well, I'd like to ask about the publications that the government does put out, because I got one at the library about how to be prepared. And what do you think about those publications? I mean, it's basically a pamphlet.
Yeah, well, you know, what it is that the government, in order for them to do something like, you know, even with my book, you have to marshal resource to do it. And you have to get people who have different types of expertise in different areas to really compile this. And obviously, our government isn't quite, let's face it, folks, functional. And if you don't have a functional government, then obviously they're going to have problems putting something, you know, cogent together. So a lot of the books that the government produces are, if they're not, if it's not too minimalistic in terms of what they give, then in a lot of cases it's outdated. A lot of the stuff that they're pulling,
it gets out.
Yeah, and you know, so they don't have like up-to-date stuff or the stuff that people who have this experience, and they don't include that in a lot of cases because, quite frankly, the people that they have writing the manuals don't have that experience.
Well, before we go to any phone calls, let's just have one section of practical advice. Like, what should every New Yorker have in their pockets or pocketbooks when they leave their house?
Well, I think that every New Yorker should indeed carry what's called a non-incentive flashlight. You know, you never hear about anyone speaking about non-incentive.
Right, non-incentive. What does that explain? What that means?
Well,
like burning, right? It doesn't cause a fire.
Right. You know, a lot of cases you'll have a flashlight, normal flashlights, mag lights, the ones that are made out of metal and things. But New Yorkers kind of travel in the subways, and in many cases, you know, in a city this size, we have a huge gas grid, and in some cases there may be an accident that releases gas into the air, and which is highly volatile.
Well, we saw what happened just a few weeks ago on the Upper East Side.
That's right.
The fellow caused
Major
it, but I don't think he even realized
he didn't
how
know
powerful that is.
Yeah, when gas explodes in that way, it's like what's called in the military a fuel air explosive. So having a flashlight that cannot spark an explosion is very important.
So your flashlight, if you have a regular flashlight and you snap it on, you actually could cause a spark to set off gas that's leaking from pipes.
Right.
We're talking about an earthquake, flood, terrorist incident that has disrupted the pipes that are underneath the city and are now spewing out
gas. So like when you turn on the flashlight, if it doesn't have what's called like very tight O-rings, that whatever gas or whatever flammable substance or gas that's in the air will seep inside of the flashlight. When you turn it on, the contacts inside, there's a little micro spark which can ignite a gas. Or you can actually build up a static charge and, you know, touch something, the metal to metal, which could create a spark, and it can also,
you know. Describe this non-incendiary flashlight. How is that different?
Well, non-incendiary flashlight is just, it's a flashlight that, you know, where the components are hermetically sealed inside, where like most non-incendiary flashlights can be immersed. You can put them underwater. So that's one way that you can know you have one.
They still stay on underwater.
Yeah, they'll still stay on. It's always better to have an LED light than a regular incandescent bulb, because LED lights, they don't shatter as easily. And also, they burn longer, which is called burn time. Flashlights have a burn time, like a candle.
Without getting into it, we had a couple of weeks ago Peter Lance on, who, by the way, was in the New York Times yesterday, and whose program is going to be on National Geographic about the book that he was discussing. But he was describing, we showed a diagram of how these terrorists he was tracking down created a mini bomb in order to bring down an airplane, and they used a flashlight light bulb broken to ignite the explosive.
Yeah, that's a common technique.
It's a detonator.
Yeah, they use the filament. The filament heats, and then they use that.
So you want to stay away from that because you don't want a filament in a gas environment.
No. And, you know, so the flashlight, also, for New Yorkers, I would definitely say that some sort of a multi-tool is in order, which is some of those things you've seen it before. The Leatherman, they look like pliers, and although that one. You have one?
Yeah, a little one. I have the leather boy. It's called.
Leather boy. Okay.
Leather boy.
But do you have it with you?
Yeah, well, I bring it with me. I never carry it anywhere anymore because I'm afraid of being stopped. I mean, they search your bags. What should I think about? You know, worry about like somebody looking through my bag and saying, "Well, what do you got all this gear? It looks like you got a burglary tool here."
No, you know, it depends. Generally speaking, that what New Yorkers need to carry really wouldn't take up any more space than a larger sized wallet.
Yeah.
The only thing that I think that New Yorkers, what they don't know is like in people who ride the subways, there's a thing called a smoke hood, that you can wear that can actually give you breathable air. If you ever caught in a fire under, and I have been with my son, and my son Amen and I were in a fire at 168th Street, and it was the only occasion where I actually had to go into my bag and actually use this because I was petrified for his safety.
I have more questions about you a little bit, about your background and how you came to this, but let's try and take a call. Again, our number is 212-757-1538. Our guest is Aton Edwards, the author of Preparedness Now, and you're on.
That white bitch is really ugly, yo. She really ugly.
I don't know, that was... you're on.
Hello?
Hello? You're on? I guess not.
Just got an echo.
We just got an echo. We'll try later. But let's talk a little bit about how, Aton Edwards, you came to this business, because you come from a military family?
Yeah, my grandfather, my uncles, my father, and I grew up in an environment that was basically that led me towards this, and it's the kind of thing that it's a strange profession because it really didn't exist in terms of a formal kind of a training, because you can't go to school, going in school and training in engineering and stuff, that doesn't prepare you for this.
No.
You have to actually do this yourself.
Yeah.
You have to get outdoors training, and I did a lot of outdoor stuff since I was a kid. And you just you run through the whole gamut. But what I did have is the advantage of having a family that allowed me to immerse and they brought the books in about nuclear war, and I basically read everything that I could get my hands on, and I developed this into, let's say, a science in a sense, and then we decided in '89 to get a group together to kind of use this, because we knew that there were going to be things that we'd be facing, and we just wanted to figure out a way that we could get like-minded people together and do this all for ourselves.
Wasn't it also something of forethought, of just thinking out what would you need?
True, but some of it is it's complex, because you have to actually develop scenarios in which you can even speculate as to what you
Might need, right.
Like for instance, you can just go by the common sense stuff, but then a lot of the things that we're dealing with today goes well beyond the realm of common sense.
And you have different packages, for example, that you talk about in your book here. The small package.
Right, that's the E-kit.
The E-kit, and then you have a medium package, and then you have your go bag, right?
Right. If you have to totally evacuate.
Right. Yeah. If people need to have that in their home, they need to have the small bag or the small case or wallet.
Sure.
And you have to kind of balance, because the thing about emergencies is that when they strike, it's not like you can say, okay, I'm in the middle of an earthquake. Man, I have a great grab and go bag in my house.
Oh.
If I only had it right here with me.
Tell us a little bit about 9/11. Where were you on 9/11?
9/11, I was actually out at, in my apartment out in Brooklyn, and my mother actually called me to tell me that the first plane hit the building. I got up late, and I thought it was a thunderclap, and I actually saw the second plane hit with my son. And it was.
What did you think?
What did I think?
Yeah, at that moment.
Well, I knew when the second plane in fact, I saw the second plane way off in the distance. So I was with the neighbor, and I was basically describing. I thought that the flight of the plane was erratic.
Sure.
And then when I saw it cross the boundary near and I said, well, they're going to ram the plane into the building.
Sure. And
that we were at war. And I knew we were at war at that point, because I knew that. Listen, I had a chance to speak about this on WRKS FM in February 2001. Came on the air and said, listen, to a caller who asked, what was going to happen. And I told her, I said, that this could be the World Trade Center's the target, probably happen in September, all cataloged. And, and then I even told her that, they could use a plane like they were going to do the Eiffel Tower.
What was the first decision you had to make at that moment?
To either stay put or to, work. The first thing I thought was when I saw the first building, I said, I know what was going on in there, and all I could do is, to feel for the people who were caught in that inferno.
Is there anything that do you have any concepts you discuss in your book that might have in any way saved the people who are above that impact zone? Well, so many died because they couldn't get out.
Yeah, even having, I speak about this individual, John DeManiuk. I hope I said his name right, just in case you're out there. who was a window washer at the World Trade Center, who actually had to chisel his way
Oh,
out.
I've heard that story. It's an amazing survival story.
Mm-hmm.
It
You heard
really
about
is.
that, right?
I did.
Yeah, and he was in an elevator on the 50th floor, and he had to kind of use his squeegee to kind of chip his way out.
Right.
And
Right through the
He
wall.
cut through several layers of drywall, right,
Mhm.
until they came to the back of a
Yeah.
tile wall.
That's
I think
right.
was the story.
Mm-hmm. And then, you know, I would say that,
He had a squeegee. What would you have had that would have made that so much easier that you always take with you?
oh, my mini pry bar. That's no doubt. I mean,
Which is a small bar about that that long.
Oh,
that,
sure.
That wide.
Uh-huh.
It's got like a hook. It looks like a can opener.
yeah, it does.
Like a big iron can opener.
Uh-huh.
But not that big. And you
No.
just carry that. That's ready to go. That'll get you through any metal. It'll
Yeah.
pry metal, bang through brick.
Chisel, right.
Chisel through.
Like, you know, we New Yorkers, we use elevators all the time.
Oh, sure.
And you know, for those of us who like, I grew up in a building up in the Bronx called the Promenade, which was famous for elevators breaking down. The thing is, everybody knows about a broken elevator in New York, and so
Sure.
it's always good to have something like a little mini pry bar to actually help pry the doors open.
Right.
And in high-rise buildings, a lot of times, like if you have a major fire, although it's not good to open doors when there is a major fire, you have to feel for heat because you can
Sure.
basically feed the fire with more oxygen.
Sure.
But generally speaking, in a lot of cases, the heat will expand the door and expand it in a way that the door will jam. And in a lot of cases, you need that extra edge to kind of open the door. Mini pry bars, the LED lights, and smoke hoods would have undoubtedly saved a number of people. Who were
Now, the
caught in
smoke hood, how big is that to carry around?
Oh, the smoke hood I carry is called the Phoenix smoke hood, and generally speaking, it's about as big as the palm of my hand. You can put it in your pocket, and nobody would know that you had it.
Right.
Oh, so it folds up pretty small.
It folds up pretty small, and
Want to
you
give
can cover your
another
head.
try? Let's.
Yeah, sure. If you want to try.
Shot. Hi, 212-757-1538. You're on.
Hello?
Go ahead.
Caller?
Yes, caller.
Oh, nobody's
I
there.
think they call it.
Caller.
Hello?
I hear someone, but I
Hello?
can't.
Yes, you're on.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to know, have they made any provisions? I'm sorry. Have they made any provisions to here in New York City, if something does happen, we can take our pets? At last I heard, Mayor Bloomberg was actually doing something about that, and that's something that I'm really concerned about. That I would never leave my animals. I would never leave my two dogs. In the case of a disaster, I wanted to know if they've made any kind of provisions for New Yorkers, because in the case of New Orleans, they haven't. All of those abandoned animals
It was terrible.
that were left
yeah.
behind, and I wanted to know if you've heard of anything specifically in New York for that.
Well, you know that the Transportation Authority and you know the Office of Emergency Management is going over plans to set certain things in place for animals. But quite frankly, I do have to tell you that even though that they're trying to make provisions for people to allow people to take them on the subways or the buses during mass evacuations, that it would be quite problematic, to have animals inside of large disaster centers, unless it was a very small animal that could be actually placed inside of one of those carriers.
Carrier, sure.
Yeah, but in case of a disaster, in all honesty, who's going to get on the subway? I know I won't.
No, not the
with
subway.
My animals.
Yeah, well, you know that in depending on what the disaster, the catastrophe is, there would be buses that would be used to evacuate civilians. It would be catch as catch can, obviously, because the best laid plans of mice and men, right? I mean, a lot of people, what looks good on paper really doesn't usually play out when you try to do it. But at the disaster center, when you get to an evacuation center, that's where the problems lie. Because if I think that generally speaking, there's going to be a major problem with that if it's not solved. If you have a large pet, I really doubt that you'll be allowed inside of a disaster shelter with a large pet. If you have a small pet, like a cat or a dog, and you have one of those carriers, I think that it would be more likely because you can keep the pet controlled, and it's also a hygiene thing. So that's what you have to look at. Hopefully you have a small pet.
Well, who's actually responsible for making the decisions on whether or not you could bring a dog, whatever protective location that they're going to send people who are in the disaster? Would it be the mayor of New York? Would it be that kind, or is it Washington that makes that decision?
Or the specific people that were right there.
Yeah.
People, when you get there, it depends.
The National
again, as you
Guard
said,
person or
the size of the disaster, the kind of disaster. It's going to be either a scary situation that's not a huge disaster in which people in an orderly fashion be bused to or go to.
But aren't there rules? But aren't there already rules instated in the case of Katrina? There were already rules that were instated that no pets were allowed. Right. So isn't it a good idea that we start instating those kind of rules and regulations for future disasters? Because they're going to happen, whether it's weather related or terror related. It could happen. You can never say no. And also, I wanted to ask you, very important. Where is a good place to put a go bag? I actually put something, I guess it's very meager, like a flashlight and some batteries, after that whole big blackout that we had on the East Coast, and that kind of was like a wake-up call for a lot of people as well. But where and what would you suggest? Where would you go in order to get the accessories you need for a very good go bag?
Where would you go? I would suggest, in terms of in New York City, there are a couple of stores. There's one store called Tents and Trails, which is actually down near where the World Trade Center used to be.
We shouldn't talk about any stores in particular.
Okay, well, just, that's,
What you're saying is
camping stores, and some Army and Navy stores. Obviously, not speaking of specific stores, you're better off with a camping store.
Okay, now you spoke of a mask that you wore that you can use in case you have smoke. I actually, at 4 o'clock in the morning, my building was on fire, and that would have come in handy at that time. So do you get those kind of smoke masks that you said that you used at that one time? Do you get that at a camping store?
No. In order for you to get the smoke hoods, you have to basically order them via the internet.
Okay. So you could just look that up.
And that's a whole hood that goes over your head, right?
You know what? There's a couple of sites. There's one called smokehoods.com, which is a high-end smoke hood. Generally speaking, I got to mention these two because, not to push brands, but for a low-cost smoke hood, there's one called the X-Scaper, X-S-C-A-P-E-R. It's very low cost, and, it costs about maybe $50. And then you can kind of like scale up. All you got to do is look smoke escape hoods up on the internet. And there's a store here called Safe for America that actually sells them in New York. That's what you'd need to look up. You'd have to check that out on the internet, though. But in terms of where you put your go bag, put it by a window, put it by someplace where you could literally go into your house, reach in, grab it, and pull it out.
Is City Hall a good place to find out whether or not I could bring my pets in a disaster?
You could call them, but generally speaking, I'll tell you something. Just like what Paul said, it's going to be catch as catch can until there's some sort of a law stated that you can bring the pets. Generally speaking, I will tell you, in a very large-scale catastrophe, that unless you can hide the pet and keep it really, really undercover, pets will probably not be allowed in large evacuation areas because, quite frankly, because of the hygiene situation and a number of other things. Other people bringing pets would be chaos. It'd be enough problems in the centers as it is, unless it's a small pet that can be controlled.
Do you think a lot of people have moved out of New York City because of that very reason, that they think that New York is no longer prepared for any kind of a disaster, that they don't want to take any chances with their pets or with their homes or any of that? So
what we're saying is that the only person who can be prepared is you.
That's right.
That's what it's all about. And we're going to move on. There's another call.
Thanks very much, Paul.
Thanks for calling.
And
again, this is Aton Edwards. He's the author of Preparedness Now. We're talking about some very important things. And one thing I want to know, is there something like UE, those stamps that you have on products that say they're safe? Is there anything like that?
Underwriters Laboratories?
Yeah. UL, that's it. Is there anything like that you can go to make sure that the product that you're using
is going to work in that moment,
right?
Approved.
Okay, yeah, the Draeger, which is a German-made company that makes a smoke hood, which is a very expensive smoke hood for just working people. They're tested by the Government Services Agency, which is GSA. Yeah. So that's approved. All of the other smoke hoods generally are tested. Some of them for the European labs, which in many ways the criteria is higher for the European stuff than it is for the United States.
I see.
I also want to say something to the other caller too. New Yorkers, I want to tell all the New Yorkers, no more battery flashlights, okay? Because you all remember what happened in the blackout 2003, right?
Right.
That the battery flashlights are not the way to go for an emergency light, simply because you're not going to find batteries for prolonged blackout, as we just had in Astoria. Go with the shake lights. Night Star is the best.
What about the kind
the
that you
crank
crank
lights,
it?
anything that doesn't use batteries for your emergency light, because quite frankly, you're better off with the shaker than the crank, because the crank
Eventually, your
break.
batteries go dead, and if it's a 2-week-long blackout,
And then you're going to get ripped off by somebody who's selling cheap batteries on the street that would normally
won't
cost
last.
50 cents for 10, but it'll be $50 for the same 10.
oh, that's a sad situation. That's the type of thing I'm afraid of. We're coming to the end here. Let's give another shot here. You're on.
Hello?
Hello, you're on the radio, on television. You're.
Hello?
Yes,
Hi.
go ahead.
Hello?
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead.
Clear.
Yes, I have a question for Mr. Edwards.
Yes, sir.
Yes, I'd like to talk about the safety packages.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, am I on the air?
Yes,
you
yes,
are.
you are.
We don't have much time. Go ahead.
Okay, yes, about the safety packages. I live in a small apartment building. Which safety package should I buy?
I don't think that you should buy anything that's pre-made. I think that you should basically compose one for yourself. I think that it should consist of a battery-free flashlight. It should consist of, a good non-incentive flashlight, battery-free, your multi-tool, some food, some clothing, some extra medicine if you needed, a small first aid kit, some extra items just to keep you.
What about water?
A small
The
pry
little pry
bar,
bar?
yeah, and some water, or some, like what they call a little thing called a survival straw, just in case that the water that you go to, if the water isn't purified, you're going to need a way to purify it. There's a little device called a survival straw, because $19 you can drink the water through this straw, and it will purify it. It's also virucidal. It'll kill
It's got a
viruses.
filter in
It's got a
the
filter,
straw.
and
All
yeah,
right.
it kills viruses as well.
Thank you very much, caller.
Thanks
Very
for
much time.
calling.
And you have a quick question?
Hello, yeah.
Go ahead.
I have a question about my fire escape.
Go ahead.
Unfortunately in New York, and I know a lot of people have this same problem, that they only have one window, like in their apartment. And, hold on, get out.
We don't have much time.
Down. Okay, and I only have one, I have my air conditioner in my fire escape window, unfortunately.
Not good.
Is there a way that, like, is there an alternative to that, like putting my air conditioner somewhere else in the apartment so that the fire escape is accessible?
Yeah, you're going to have to do that. You have to clear all points of egress. Make sure that you have a fire extinguisher. Clear all points of egress.
This is going to happen, and
I'm sorry, we're just running out of time.
Running out of time.
Okay,
Aton,
Aton
thank you
Edwards,
so much
thank you
for
so
coming.
much. This is
Thanks,
your
Paul.
book. It was very great. This is behind us here, and if you want to see
All right,
it here,
thanks, Aton.
Preparedness Now. It's available many places. You can pick up a copy, and it has a lot more details about the subject matter that we're talking about right here. Be really careful. Stay safe. We're living in dangerous times. It's obvious that's going on. Today is 1 year since Katrina, and we give our our sadness. We have a lot of sadness towards
Yeah,
those
let's not
lost,
forget about
and we hope
everybody
that
down
people
in New
Orleans get
Orleans
an
and the
opportunity
whole
to
Gulf
rebuild.
Coast. That's
Yeah.
right.
I'm Paul DeRienzo Joan Moossy, Aton Edwards. Thanks very much for joining us. We'll
See you next week.
I'll let them talk.